In the year 930, on the morning of the 11th of January, an army appeared on the horizon outside the city of Mecca. The pilgrims inside the city did not panic. The Hajj had just begun. The plain outside the holy city was always crowded that week. Caravans, travelers from Yemen and Syria, sellers of dates and cloth. So when an organized column of horsemen approached the gates in marching order, the local garrison rode out to ask their business. At the head of the column was a man in his 20s. He wore the loose robes of an Arabian warrior. His name was Abu Tahir Sulayman al-Jannabi. He claimed his right of entry as a Muslim, performing the pilgrimage. He gave his pledge that the city and its people would be safe. The garrison commander accepted the pledge. 2 hours later, that commander was dead. For the next 8 days, an organized Muslim army would systematically kill the pilgrims of Mecca inside the courtyard of the holiest building in Islam. They would throw the bodies of pilgrims down the Well of Zamzam, the sacred spring of the city. They would strip the Kaaba of its black silk covering and tear the gilded doors off the building. And then, from the eastern corner of the Kaaba, they would pry loose a small dark stone, roughly the size of a man's 2 fists. It was the most sacred physical object in Islam. According to tradition, it had been set there by the prophet Abraham himself. They wrapped it. They put it on a camel. They rode east into the desert. The black stone would not return to Mecca for 22 years. When it came back, it was in 7 pieces. This is the story of how a Muslim army sacked the holiest city in Islam and held its most sacred relic for ransom for 2 decades, while the most powerful caliph on earth could do nothing to stop them. I'm Brother Idris, and welcome to the archive, where forgotten history lives again. To understand what happened in 930, you have to understand 2 things: what the Qarmatians actually were, and why the Abbasid Caliphate could not protect its own holy city. The Qarmatians had grown out of the great Ismaili movement of the 9th century. Isma'ilism was a branch of Shia Islam whose followers believed the legitimate line of imams had passed through a man named Ismail ibn Jafar in the 8th century. This was a different line from the one accepted by mainstream Shia, and a heretical line in the eyes of the Sunni majority. By the late 9th century, Ismaili missionaries were operating across the entire Islamic world, from Yemen to North Africa to Iran. Most worked in secrecy. Some organized rebellions. A few of them built states. In the year 899, an Ismaili missionary named Abu Sa'id al-Jannabi seized the oasis settlements of eastern Arabia. The region was known in the medieval Arabic sources as Bahrain. This was not the modern country of the same name. It was a much larger area along the western shore of the Persian Gulf, including the oases of what is today the al-Aswad province of Saudi Arabia. Abu Sa'id made his capital at the oasis town of Hajar. From this base, he built something extraordinary. Historians describe the Qarmatian state as one of the first communal societies in recorded history. Property was held in common. Land was distributed equally among initiated believers. The state was governed by a council of 6 men, alongside a chief who was a first among equals. According to the Persian traveler Nasir Khusraw, who visited a century later, the Qarmatians employed 30,000 African slaves for heavy labor, while the believers themselves were free of taxes and labor. The state was funded by booty and by tolls collected on Gulf shipping. It built mills, public bathhouses, granaries, and irrigation works. To the Sunni caliphate in Baghdad, this was heresy. And worse than heresy, it was heresy with an army. Abu Sa'id died in the year 913. After a brief succession struggle, his son Abu Tahir came to power in 923. He was 17 years old. By all surviving accounts, he was a brilliant tactician and a terrifying ideologue. In the first year of his reign, he raided Basra. 4 years later, in 927, he ambushed in the Abbasid imperial army outside Kufa and shattered it. In 928, he marched on Baghdad itself. The Abbasid capital, the largest city in the world at that time, was forced to mobilize its full garrison. The Qarmatians withdrew at the last moment. By that point, something had changed in Abu Tahir. According to Ismaili sources, in that same year, he became convinced that the long-awaited Mahdi had finally arrived. The Mahdi was the messianic figure of Shia Islamic theology, the Redeemer who would appear at the end of time, abolish the existing religious law, and inaugurate a new age. Abu Tahir declared that the era of Islam itself was ending. The Quran, the Prophet, the rituals, all of it was being superseded by a new, direct revelation. The historian Farhad Daftari, the leading modern scholar of Ismaili history, has argued that this conviction is what made the sack of Mecca possible. The Qarmatians no longer believed Mecca was holy at all. To understand why no one stopped them, you have to look at Baghdad. In the year 930, the Abbasid caliph was a man named al-muqtadir. He was 36 years old. He had been placed on the throne at the age of 13 by court officials who wanted a weak ruler they could control. They had succeeded. For nearly a quarter of a century, he had been the puppet of viziers, of generals, and of palace women. Under his reign, the Abbasid Empire was visibly disintegrating. North Africa had broken away under a rival Shia dynasty called the Fatimids. Egypt was sliding out of imperial control. The Byzantines were raiding Anatolia at will. Even the imperial guards in Baghdad were openly rebellious. Most of them were Turkish slave soldiers, and their officers had learned that the road to political power ran through controlled mutiny. The Carmatian raids of the previous decade had already done enormous damage. They had cut the pilgrimage routes from Iraq to Mecca several times. They had destroyed the agricultural districts that produced most of the caliphate's revenue. In the year before the sack of Mecca, a court faction in Baghdad had briefly deposed al-muqtadir and replaced him with another Abbasid prince. After 3 days of street fighting, al-muqtadir was restored, but only as a more diminished figure than before. This was the man whose responsibility it was to defend Mecca. Abu Tahir set out from Hajar in the autumn of 929. His army moved across the desert in the cooler months. He brought between 700 and 1,500 mounted warriors, according to surviving accounts. The garrison of Mecca was small. The city depended on the symbolic protection of being the holiest place in Islam, a place that no Muslim army would dare to attack. That was the assumption Abu Tahir was about to destroy. On the morning of the 11th of January, after his pledge of pilgrim status had been accepted, his men entered the city. The contemporary historian Ibn al-Athir, working from earlier sources, described what happened next. The Qarmatian warriors moved into the sacred mosque. They began to kill the pilgrims, as those pilgrims performed the ritual circling of the Kaaba. According to the chronicler Miskawayh, Abu Tahir himself sat on horseback at the gate of the mosque, watching, while his men carried out the killings. As the killing continued, he is reported to have mocked the dying pilgrims by quoting verses from the Quran, verses that promised divine protection to those who entered the sacred precinct. The killing went on for 8 days, according to some sources, as long as 11. The Qarmatian army withdrew to its camp outside the city each night and returned in the morning. When it was over, contemporary sources estimated 30,000 pilgrims dead. The bodies were not buried. Many were left where they had fallen. Others were thrown down the Well of Zamzam, the sacred spring inside the mosque compound, said by tradition to have been opened by the angel Gabriel for the prophet Ishmael. The Kaaba itself was stripped. Its gold and silver lamps were taken. Its kiswah, the black silk covering, was torn down. Its gilded doors were ripped from the wall. And then, From the southeastern corner of the Kaaba, Abu Tahir personally pried out the black stone. The black stone was the most sacred physical relic in Islam. According to Islamic tradition, it had been brought down from paradise by the angel Gabriel and given to Abraham, who set it in the eastern corner of the Kaaba. The Prophet Muhammad had kissed it. Every pilgrim since had tried to kiss it during their circumambulation of the building. It was a dark, irregular stone, roughly the size of 2 handspans, set into the eastern corner. Abu Tahir wrapped it in cloth, loaded it onto a camel, and the Qarmatian army rode east. The governor of Mecca was dead. The garrison was destroyed. The wealthier pilgrims had been seized for ransom, and the most holy object in the Muslim world had been taken away. The news reached Baghdad days later. The reaction was paralysis. According to court chroniclers, al-muqtadir ordered an army assembled and dispatched against the Carmatians. That army never reached eastern Arabia. Within weeks of the sack, the political situation in Baghdad collapsed again. The commander of the caliph's guard, a Turkish eunuch named Munis al-Muzaffar, broke openly with the court faction. In 932, 2 years after the sack of Mecca, civil war returned to Baghdad. Munis marched on the capital. Al-Muqtadir rode out to meet him. The caliph was killed in the fighting. His head was paraded through the streets on a spear. The man whose duty it was to order the recovery of the black stone was now himself a corpse. For the next 20 years, the Abbasid throne would change hands repeatedly. 3 caliphs in 5 years. Coups and counter-coups. The empire's revenues collapsed. The military expanded its power. There was no expedition to Hajar. There was no recovery of the stone. Meanwhile, the Carmatians had carried the black stone in a slow ceremonial procession across the eastern Arabian desert. According to surviving Ismaili sources, they placed it in the great mosque of Hajar, not as a sacred object, as a trophy. To them, the stone meant nothing. The era of Islam was over. The empty corner of the Kaaba in Mecca was, in the meantime, filled with a wooden replacement. Several offers were made to ransom the stone. According to the historian al-Suli, the Abbasid government at one point offered 50,000 gold dinars, the equivalent of a small kingdom's annual revenue. Abu Tahir refused. The reason is debated. Some say he wanted the Sunni world to humiliate itself further. Others say there was no price he would accept while he still believed the Mahdi was coming. Abu Tahir died in 944. The cause was reportedly smallpox. After his death, his brothers took control of the Qarmatian state. By the early 950s, the Fatimid Caliphate in North Africa had become a major Mediterranean power. The Fatimids were also Ismaili, but a separate and rival branch from the Carmatians. They wanted recognition from the Sunni world, and the continued presence of the black stone in Qarmatian hands was becoming politically inconvenient. According to the historian al-Juwayni, writing in the 13th century, it was the Fatimid Caliph who eventually pressured the Qarmatians to return the stone. In the year 951, 22 years after the sack of Mecca, a wrapped sack appeared one morning in the great mosque of Kufa in southern Iraq. It was attached to a note. The note read, "By command we took it, and by command we have brought it back." Inside the sack was the black stone. It was in 7 pieces. The custodians of the Kaaba in Mecca were notified. A delegation traveled north to Kufa to verify the relic. They took it back to Mecca and reset the pieces in the eastern corner of the Kaaba. To hold the 7 fragments together, they commissioned 2 Meccan goldsmiths to construct a silver frame. The frame was hammered around the fragments in the shape of an irregular ring. That frame, repaired and re-silvered many times across the centuries, is still around the black stone today. Every pilgrim who has kissed the stone since the year 952 has kissed it through the silver halo originally made to hold the broken pieces together. A question that historians and scientists have asked for a long time is what exactly the black stone is. Islamic tradition holds that it was brought down from paradise by the angel Gabriel. Pre-Islamic accounts suggest it was already venerated in the Kaaba long before the Prophet's time. In modern times, several scientific theories have been proposed. The Austrian geologist Paul Partsch, in 1857, was the first to publish an analysis arguing that the stone is a meteorite. In 1974, two American geologists named Robert Dietz and John McCone published a counterargument. They proposed instead that the stone is an agate, a banded sedimentary stone of purely terrestrial origin. A later team of geologists, led by Anthony Hampton, studied volcanic samples from the area around Mecca. They found unusually high levels of the rare element iridium and the presence of what are called shatter cones, geological features that only form under the extreme pressure of a meteorite impact. But none of these analyses were performed on the stone itself. The stone has never been examined with modern scientific instruments. It cannot be removed from the Kaaba. The matter remains, scientifically speaking, unresolved. What is certain is that the black stone in Mecca today still bears the 7 scars of what happened in 930. Up close, the cracks are still visible across its surface. They are the silent record of the day a Muslim army held the holiest object in Islam for ransom. The Carmatian state survived for another century after the return of the stone. It declined slowly, riven by disputes between Abu Tahir's successors. Its territory in eastern Arabia was finally absorbed by other Arab powers in the 11th century. Mainstream Sunni Islam erased the Qarmatians from its memory. The Fatimid Caliphate, which had inherited some of their messianic ideas, transformed isma'ilism into a far more orthodox movement. Today, the name Qarmatian appears mostly in academic histories of medieval Islam. But the 7 scars on the black stone remain. When a pilgrim today bends to kiss the stone in the eastern corner of the Kaaba, the silver frame around it tells a story most pilgrims do not know. It tells the story of a Muslim warlord who became convinced that the age of Islam was over. It tells the story of a caliph in Baghdad who was too weak to defend his own holy city. It tells the story of 22 years during which the most sacred object in Islam sat on a pillar in the eastern Arabian desert, while the Sunni world could not retrieve it. And it tells the story of an empty corner of the Kaaba, a silent space where the stone used to be, that no one alive at the time was sure would ever be filled again. I'm Brother Idris, and the archive remains open.